I never imagined I'd draw the short straw. In our line of work, that phrase held a far heavier meaning than it did for most. For us, it wasn't just a metaphor, it was a death sentence. And yet, here I was, staring at the thin black stick in my hand, shorter than the rest. The room had gone dead silent, save for the quiet hum of the ship's ventilation system. No one made eye contact. The crew had already resigned themselves to the reality. This mission was mine now. A reconnaissance flyby of Earth, they said. In and out. The Galactic Council's orders had been clear, but everyone knew what it meant. Earth wasn't just a quarantine planet. It was a black hole of uncertainty and death. No one who ventured near had ever returned to speak of what they found. Yet the Council insisted we try again, as if gambling with our lives was some cosmic game they could afford to lose. I squeezed the straw between my fingers, feeling the tension coil in my chest. This wasn't a mission anyone wanted. I could see it in the faces of my fellow pilots, relief mixed with pity. They were glad it wasn't them, but at the same time, they knew what it meant for me. "We leave at dawn," the commander said, breaking the silence. His voice was a dull rasp, emotionless, as though sending another crew member to their doom was a routine part of his day. He turned and left without a second glance. The others filed out after him, and I was left standing alone, staring at that cursed straw. It seemed like such an insignificant thing to decide the fate of a being, but that was the reality. In a galaxy filled with advanced technology, interstellar travel, and near-immortal lifespans, chance still played a hand in our survival. As I sat down in the empty mess hall, the legends of Earth played over in my mind like a dark reel of forgotten memories. Everyone had heard the stories, whispered from one crew to another over the years. Earth, the Deathworld. A planet so dangerous it had been sealed off from the rest of the galaxy. Its people, the humans, had once been on the verge of joining us among the stars. They'd achieved technological heights almost unparalleled. But then, something changed. No one knew exactly what had happened. The official records were sealed, but there were always rumors. Some said humans had annihilated themselves in a war so destructive, the very fabric of their reality had been torn. Others believed they had tapped into some ancient force, something primal that the Galactic Council feared would spread like a virus if they were allowed to leave their planet. I didn't know what to believe. I had always been skeptical, dismissing the stories as exaggerated warnings to keep curious pilots from breaking protocol. But now, as I sat there, preparing to embark on this mission, I couldn't help but wonder. Was there truth in the legends? Could humanity really be as dangerous as they said? Or was there something more, something hidden beneath the surface that even the Council didn't understand? I didn't fear humanity's violence. In my time as a pilot, I'd seen my share of brutal conflicts, civilizations that tore each other apart over trivial matters. I'd witnessed the raw power of weapons that could vaporize planets and the destruction caused by galactic empires vying for control. Violence wasn't new to me. It was the unknown that gnawed at me. What was it about Earth that the Council feared so much they had quarantined the entire planet? Why had no one ever returned from a mission there? And why now, after all these years, were we being sent back? I ran my hand over the cold surface of the table, trying to push the thoughts from my mind, but they clung to me like shadows. I had always trusted my instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming at me to turn back, to refuse the mission. But that wasn't an option. Orders were orders, and I had drawn the short straw. I stood up, heading toward my quarters. The corridors of the ship were eerily quiet, the crew avoiding me as if my fate might rub off on them. I didn't blame them. I would have done the same. It was an unspoken rule among pilots. Those assigned to Earth missions were already dead. They were ghosts walking, and no one wanted to be haunted. Inside my room, I began packing my gear, the routine movements doing little to calm the storm raging in my mind. My thoughts kept drifting back to the mission brief, to the cryptic warnings we'd been given. The Council had been vague, too vague. It was as if they didn't want us to know what we were truly walking into. "We don't need heroes, we need survivors," they had said. A statement as cold and hollow as the void of space. I had heard those words before, countless times, but this time they felt different. more like a death warrant than encouragement. As I prepped my gear, the ship's AI pinged, reminding me to check the latest diagnostics. I moved to the small console in the corner of my quarters, watching as data scrolled across the screen. Everything seemed normal for now, but Earth had a way of messing with even the most advanced tech. They say the planet has an electromagnetic field like no other, I thought absently, recalling one of the many warnings. It wasn't long before I found myself staring out of the small viewport in my room, watching the stars pass by in a slow, deliberate dance. I could almost feel the weight of Earth, even though we were still a day out. That was the thing about the Deathworld. It seemed to have a pull that went beyond physical gravity. It was a black hole of fear, of doubt, of the unknown. And that's when it hit me, an unshakable, gnawing fear that there was something more to this mission, something I hadn't been told. It wasn't just Earth's destructive history or its quarantine. It was the way the Council had spoken, the way they had looked at me when giving the orders. There had been something in their eyes, a shadow of fear, maybe even regret. I had heard the rumors, of course. Whispers of secret Council agendas, of hidden truths buried deep within Earth's crust, locked away from the galaxy for a reason. But no one ever spoke of what those secrets were. The fear of the unknown was enough to silence even the most curious. And now, I was about to find out for myself, whether I wanted to or not. As the hours ticked by, sleep became impossible. My mind was racing, jumping from one fear to another. Every legend, every rumor I had ever heard about Earth began to play over in my head. The way the humans had destroyed entire fleets with technology that seemed impossible. How their cities had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only dust and ruins. And then, there were the disappearances, the crews that had gone before us, never to return, their ships vanishing without so much as a distress signal. But it wasn't just the stories of destruction that haunted me. It was the ones that didn't make sense. The ones that hinted at something far worse. Something beyond human violence. A force, a presence, that defied explanation. I tried to shake the feeling, to remind myself that I was a seasoned pilot, that I had faced worse odds before. But this was different. Earth was different, and deep down, I knew it. The lights in my room flickered as the ship shifted into sublight speed, the familiar hum of the engines changing pitch. We were close now, too close. There was no turning back. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mission settle onto my shoulders. This was it. The point of no return. All I could do now was survive. But even that felt like a fool's hope. I stood at the threshold of my room, the ship's cold metal floor beneath my boots anchoring me to the present. Outside the small porthole, the stars blurred past us, a reminder of just how far we were from home. But the space between was shrinking, drawing us closer to Earth with each passing second. Closer to the unknown. The ship's AI had already begun final descent calculations. I ran a hand through my hair, more out of habit than necessity. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on my mind, a pressure that only grew as we neared the planet. I didn't need to look at the screens to know Earth was ahead of us. I could feel it, a tightening in the gut, a prickling on the back of the neck. Instinct, or maybe fear, but it was real. I pushed through the door into the corridor, where the usual bustle of crew activity was subdued. The tension had spread like an invisible fog, and it settled into every corner. Pilots, engineers, navigators, all of them moved with a mechanical efficiency, avoiding conversation, their faces blank. But I could see it in their eyes. They were haunted, too. They knew this mission was different. I made my way to the command deck, and the sterile air of the ship's systems gave way to the low murmur of quiet conversations. The bridge was dimly lit, the soft glow of consoles casting long shadows across the faces of the crew. Everyone was focused, staring at their displays, but I sensed their minds weren't entirely on their tasks. Earth was hanging over them, just like it was hanging over me. "Status?" I asked, approaching the central console. One of the officers, a wiry navigator named Sarn, barely looked up from his screen. His fingers hovered over the controls, frozen in the act of inputting commands. "Approaching the outer edges of Earth's electromagnetic field," he said in a low voice. "Expecting contact within 2 hours." Sarn wasn't a man of many words, but his tone said everything. We were entering dangerous territory, and even the most experienced among us weren't immune to the creeping anxiety. Earth's field was known to wreak havoc on ships that entered its orbit. The stories of tech failures and bizarre malfunctions were legendary, but we were prepared, or at least, we thought we were. Everything looks stable for now, Sarn added, his voice trailing off into uncertainty. I nodded, but his words didn't comfort me. Stable for now? In a mission like this, that was the best we could hope for. And it wasn't nearly enough. I took my place at the command station, my eyes scanning the live feeds, the navigational data, the endless stream of numbers and coordinates. It was all routine, all familiar, but there was a thread of unease running through every line of code. Something felt wrong. As we closed in on Earth, the ship's sensors began picking up strange energy signatures. The readings were erratic, fluctuating in ways that didn't match any known phenomena. I leaned closer to the display, narrowing my eyes. "What is that?" I muttered to no one in particular. Sarn's fingers flew across his console as he tried to stabilize the data, but the readings only grew more confusing. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "It's like the planet's throwing off interference." I stared at the chaotic data. It wasn't just interference. It was something else, something alive, moving beneath the surface. The electromagnetic anomalies we'd been warned about seemed to pulse in rhythm, as though they were reacting to our presence. "It's not natural," I said aloud, my words hanging in the air. Behind me, the ship's tactical officer, Merrick, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was a broad-shouldered veteran of countless battles, his usually steady demeanor now cracking under the pressure. "Could be atmospheric," he suggested, though I could tell by his tone that even he didn't believe it. "Could be," I replied, not convinced. I keyed in a sequence, sending a burst of data to the AI core, hoping it would make more sense of the readings than we could. But it wasn't just the numbers that bothered me. There was a sense, a deep, almost primal feeling, that something was watching us. I glanced at the viewport, where Earth's blue sphere hung in the distance, growing larger by the minute. The planet itself seemed to shimmer with unseen energy, as though it was aware of us, and waiting. Legends of Earth, I thought. The stories came rushing back, unbidden. The whispers of ancient technologies buried beneath the surface. The tales of human wars so violent they had fractured not just their own world, but the very space around them. But those were just stories, weren't they? Just warnings meant to keep pilots like me from venturing too close. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth buried in the legends. I knew what fear felt like. I'd been on the edge of death more times than I could count, and I'd survived every one of them. But this was different. This wasn't the fear of combat or of dying in the cold vacuum of space. This was something deeper. This was the fear of the unknown. The crew's silence stretched on, punctuated only by the soft beeps and whirs of the ship's systems. Merrick's hands drummed against the armrest of his chair, his patience wearing thin. He wasn't the type to sit idle, waiting for something to happen. "We've got to be ready for anything," he said, more to himself than to me. I gave a curt nod, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept my focus on the data streaming in from our sensors, but no matter how much I tried to analyze it, I couldn't shake the growing sense that Earth was different. This wasn't just another world, another mission. There was something here, something buried beneath centuries of silence, waiting to be uncovered. As we continued our descent, the ship's systems began to flicker, lights dimming sporadically before snapping back into place. The AI core worked overtime to compensate for the anomalies, but it was clear that something was tampering with our systems. I watched the displays with a growing sense of dread. We hadn't even reached the planet yet, and already the rules were changing. Then, without warning, the ship lurched violently, sending several crew members sprawling from their seats. I grabbed onto the nearest console, steadying myself as alarms blared. "What the hell was that?" Merrick shouted, his hands gripping the sides of his chair. Sarn's voice was strained as he fought to regain control of the ship's course. "Something's pulling us off trajectory. It's like a gravity well, but localized." Impossible. I narrowed my eyes, my fingers tightening on the console. Gravity, well, there was no reason Earth's gravity should affect us like this. Not at this distance. And yet, we were being dragged toward the planet, faster than the ship's engines could compensate. "We're losing altitude," Sarn reported, his voice barely hiding the panic creeping into his words. "At this rate, we'll hit the atmosphere in less than 30 minutes. My mind raced, trying to find a solution, but the data made no sense. Every simulation, every contingency plan had failed to account for something like this. Earth's gravitational pull shouldn't have been able to affect us this far out. Yet here we were, being dragged into its orbit like a piece of debris. And then, as abruptly as it had started, the pull stopped. The ship leveled out, the alarms silencing themselves as systems returned to normal. The lights flickered back to full power, and for a moment, it was as if nothing had happened. But the tension in the room didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper. "What just happened?" I asked, my voice low, trying to mask the rising dread. Sarn's hands moved frantically over his controls, recalibrating the ship's systems. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever it was coming from the planet." Merrick let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "First time in my life I've seen gravity act like that. You sure it's not some tech malfunction?" "Not a chance," Sarn replied, more focused than ever. "Everything's running at full efficiency. It's the planet. It's pulling us in." I glanced back at the viewport, at the looming blue and green orb that now seemed closer than ever. "What the hell is down there?" "We can't keep drifting like this," I said, forcing myself to focus. "Prepare for controlled descent." Sarn's eyes flickered with doubt, but he nodded, moving to adjust the ship's trajectory. "It's risky," he said, "but we don't have much choice. We're already caught in the pull. If we don't go down now, we might never get the chance." I knew he was right. We couldn't float here forever, waiting for the unknown to rip us apart. Whatever Earth was hiding, we were about to come face to face with it. As the ship began its slow descent toward the planet's atmosphere, I felt the weight in my chest grow heavier. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was a descent into something far darker, something we weren't prepared for. The final moments before we breached the atmosphere were filled with the whine of the ship's engines struggling to keep pace with the gravity. Every system was pushed to its limits, and yet there was nothing we could do but ride the current. Finally, with a shuddering groan, we passed through the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere, the clouds parting to reveal the landscape below. And what I saw wasn't what I expected. The surface of the planet was almost pristine. From this altitude, there were no signs of destruction, no scars of war or evidence of the devastation we had been led to believe. Vast forests stretched as far as the eye could see, rivers snaked through valleys, and the sky was a clear, pale blue. It was almost beautiful. But beneath that beauty, there was something else, a presence. I could feel it, like a static charge in the air, buzzing just beneath the surface of reality. It was watching us, waiting. The crew remained silent as we descended further, the ship's sensors struggling to make sense of the energy signatures coming from below. Every reading seemed contradictory, as though the planet itself was cloaked in some kind of interference. We broke through the clouds, descending toward a vast stretch of forested land. The ship's AI mapped the terrain ahead, highlighting a potential landing site. But I wasn't focused on the land anymore. My eyes were drawn to something else, something on the horizon. A city. But it wasn't like any city I had seen before. Towering structures rose into the sky, their forms sleek and angular, made from materials that shimmered in the sunlight. It was ancient, yet impossibly advanced, and there was no sign of life. No movement, no lights, just silence. "What the hell is that?" Merrick whispered, his voice breaking the spell. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely audible. "But we're about to find out." We broke through the dense cloud cover in silence. The ship's exterior rattled with the strain of the atmosphere, but inside, it felt as though time had paused. The crew's eyes were locked on the planet below, an eerie calm settling over them as if the gravity of our descent had stripped away any last vestiges of normalcy. From the corner of my vision, I saw Merrick tighten his grip on the console, his knuckles white with tension. Normally, he was the voice of reason, the one to crack a joke in the middle of danger. Now, his silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I felt it too, a creeping sensation like we were being pulled toward something inevitable. Earth's surface, vast and almost tranquil, unfolded below. As the ship dipped lower, the previously indistinct patterns resolved into vivid details. Endless forests, lakes glistening in the sunlight, and mountain ranges that stretched into the horizon. This world was still alive, still untouched by the devastation we'd been told about. Yet something about it all felt wrong. It was too perfect, too serene. The reports had been clear. Earth was a death world, a planet teeming with danger. But looking down, it was as if we'd stepped into an ancient paradise, preserved in time. No signs of war, no toxic wastelands, just untouched wilderness. The AI chimed softly in my earpiece, bringing me back. Approaching landing site, approximately 3 kilometers from anomalous energy readings. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. Prepare for touchdown. Full systems check on all sensors. I want constant data streams the moment we're on the ground. Yes, sir, Soren responded. His voice carried a tremor, a crack that wasn't there before. The ship's engines roared in defiance as we began the final descent, the landing thrusters slowing us just enough to make contact without crashing. I watched the display as the surface loomed closer, the forest canopy stretching up like a sea of dark green fingers. In those final moments before landing, the ship shuddered again, only this time it wasn't the atmosphere. The same strange pull from earlier, that inexplicable gravity well, tugged at the ship. But we were too close to stop now. I grit my teeth as the force intensified, my eyes darting between the readings and the viewport. Nothing was making sense. With a heavy lurch, the ship settled onto the forest floor, sinking slightly into the soft earth. The engines powered down, and the silence that followed was deafening. I rose slowly from the command chair, my eyes still fixed on the view outside. Towering trees stretched high above us, their thick trunks entwined with vines. The landscape was bathed in an almost golden light as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. It looked peaceful. But peace was an illusion. I could feel it, just beneath the surface. This planet was hiding something. All right, we're on the ground, I said, turning toward Merrick and Soren. Let's keep the systems running. I want real-time updates. Something's off about this place, and I don't trust it. Merrick nodded, rising from his seat with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned soldier. You don't have to tell me twice, he muttered under his breath. He holstered his sidearm, a weapon we weren't even sure would be effective here. But it wasn't about being prepared anymore. It was about survival. I made my way toward the airlock, my mind churning with questions. As I walked, I caught fragments of conversation from the rest of the crew. Everyone was waiting for something to go wrong, and the longer we were here, the more certain it felt. By the time I reached the airlock, I could hear Soren's voice through the comms. Still picking up those anomalous energy readings. They're coming from beneath the surface, deep underground. I paused, fingers hovering over the airlock control panel. What kind of energy? Soren hesitated. It's hard to say. Nothing we've encountered before. It's not natural, almost like a frequency, but alive. My mind flashed back to the sensation of being watched, of something pulling at us from the moment we entered Earth's atmosphere. This wasn't just another planet. There was a reason it had been quarantined. I keyed in the final code, and with a hiss, the airlock door slid open. I stepped out into the dense, humid air, the scent of earth and greenery filling my lungs. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows across the ship's hull. For a moment, I was struck by the sheer beauty of the place. The trees seemed impossibly tall, their leaves shimmering in the fading light. Birds, or what I assumed were birds, called out from somewhere deeper in the forest. But the feeling remained. This wasn't paradise. This was a trap, a living entity that had been waiting for us long before we even arrived. I glanced back at Merrick as he stepped out behind me, his eyes scanning the tree line. "Doesn't look like a death world," he said, his voice low. "But I don't trust it." "Neither do I," I replied, my hand instinctively resting on the handle of my blaster. We didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't going to be caught off guard. Not here, not on this planet. We made our way through the underbrush, moving toward the energy readings that Sarn had detected. The ground was soft beneath our boots, the vegetation thick and alien. Every step felt like a journey into the unknown, the forest shifting around us like it was alive. The path wasn't clear, but the anomalies were unmistakable now. As we moved closer, the air around us began to change. It grew heavier, charged with an invisible force that prickled against my skin. The readings on my wrist console spiked, and the atmosphere seemed to hum with energy. We pushed forward, deeper into the forest, until we reached a clearing. And there, in the center, stood the source of the anomalies. A structure. It wasn't natural, nothing like the trees or the earth around us. The thing looked ancient, yet unmistakably advanced. Black stone, smooth and cold to the touch, formed a series of pillars that seemed to reach up from the ground like jagged teeth. They shimmered faintly, as if they were made of something more than just stone. Merrick stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide. "What the hell is that?" I didn't have an answer. My heart was pounding in my chest as I took a step closer to the structure. The energy coming off it was almost palpable now, a low thrum that resonated deep in my bones. The air around it seemed to ripple, distorting the space just slightly. "This is it," I said quietly. "This is what's been drawing us in." Merrick knelt beside one of the pillars, running his fingers across its surface. "This material, I've never seen anything like it, not even in the archives." "That's because it's not from here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This was built before us, before any of this." There was no denying it now. The legends were true. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was a graveyard of something far older, something that had been waiting, hidden beneath the surface for millennia. Suddenly, the air shifted again. The hum of energy grew louder, more insistent. I glanced down at my wrist console, but the readings had gone haywire. Static filled the screen, and the symbols flickered uncontrollably. "Something's happening," I said, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. "We need to." Before I could finish, the ground beneath us rumbled. The pillars vibrated, the energy within them surging. I took a step back, my pulse racing. And then, without warning, the structure activated. A blinding light exploded from the pillars, and the air was torn apart by a deafening roar. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes from the intensity of the glow. Merrick shouted something, but his voice was lost in the chaos. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the light was gone. But everything had changed. The clearing was no longer just a stretch of untouched earth. Now, there was something else, a portal, a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with a sickening glow. It hung in the air, suspended between the pillars like an open wound in reality itself. Merrick was already on his feet, staring at the vortex with wide, horrified eyes. "What the hell did we just do?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely audible. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't just a structure. It was a gateway, leading to where, I couldn't begin to guess. The energy that had drawn us here, that had pulled our ship off course, was coming from the other side. And whatever it was more powerful than anything we'd ever encountered. "We need to go," Merrick said, his voice shaking. "Now." But I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the ground as I stared into the vortex, a deep, inexplicable fear coursing through my veins. And then I saw it. Something moved within the portal. Something massive, dark, and ancient, its form barely visible through the swirling energy. It was watching us. I didn't have time to react before the ground trembled again. The pillars began to vibrate, and the air around us pulsed with an unbearable pressure. "We need to go," Merrick repeated, his voice rising in panic. I forced myself to move, my body sluggish with terror. We turned and ran, racing through the forest as the ground shook beneath our feet. The portal roared behind us, its energy crackling through the air. As we reached the ship, I glanced back one last time. The vortex was closing, but not fast enough. Something was coming through. The ground buckled beneath our feet as we ran, each step a fight to maintain balance. Merrick's breath was harsh and ragged, barely audible over the roaring pulse of the portal behind us. My own heart pounded in my ears, but it wasn't just the physical strain, it was the crushing weight of realization. Something was coming through that portal, something ancient and terrible, and we were hopelessly unprepared for it. The ship came into view, half hidden by the towering trees. My legs burned as we sprinted the final stretch, the uneven ground threatening to trip us up with every step. I glanced back, just for a second, and regretted it immediately. The portal was still there, a wound in the air, swirling with a sickly green light. But now, something more had emerged. A shape, dark and looming, slowly pushing its way through the vortex. It was massive, its form barely defined, like a shadow cast against the light. But the malice radiating from it was unmistakable. "Get inside," Merrick yelled, snapping me back to the present. He slammed his hand against the ship's control panel, the airlock hissing open with a metallic groan. We stumbled inside, the door sealing behind us just as another tremor shook the ground. Inside the ship, the silence was deafening. Merrick collapsed into the nearest seat, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. I leaned against the wall, my mind still racing. The ship's systems were online, the low hum of the engine barely audible beneath the din of my own thoughts. "Sarn," I said into the comms, my voice steadier than I felt. "What's happening outside? Do you have eyes on that thing?" Sarn's voice crackled through the comms, tinged with a nervous edge. "Whatever's coming through, it's massive. Energy readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Neither had I. I didn't have to look at the monitors to know we were in over our heads. That portal, it was more than just a gateway. It was a breach, and whatever lay on the other side had been waiting for us. "Can we take off?" Merrick asked, his voice strained. "We need to get the hell out of here before that thing gets any closer." "We're too close to the anomaly," I replied, my eyes scanning the console. "If we try to lift off now, the gravitational distortions could rip the ship apart. We need more time." Merrick cursed under his breath, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Time's the one thing we don't have." He wasn't wrong. The tremors were getting stronger, the ground outside shifting like it was alive, reacting to the portal's presence. I could feel it, deep in my bones. The planet itself was changing, reacting, as if whatever was on the other side of that breach had stirred something within the very core of Earth. The ship's internal sensors began to ping, alerting us to the escalating danger. My hand hovered over the controls, my mind racing through options. We couldn't stay here, but leaving wasn't an option either. Not yet. I glanced at Merrick. He was staring out the viewport, his eyes fixed on the distant swirl of the portal. I could see the fear in his expression, the same fear I felt gnawing at my insides. But there was something else there too, a quiet determination, a stubborn refusal to give in to the panic that threatened to take hold. "We need answers," I said quietly, stepping away from the console. "If we don't understand what we're dealing with, we're as good as dead." Merrick didn't respond at first. He kept his gaze locked on the portal, the dark shape still writhing within the vortex. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes hard. "And where do we get those answers? From the thing that's about to tear us apart?" "No." I shook my head, already forming a plan in my mind. "From whatever's underneath that structure. The energy readings, it's all coming from underground. There's something here, something ancient, and it's tied to this portal." Merrick stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want to go back out there, after what we just saw?" "I don't think we have a choice," I said. "Whatever's coming through that portal, it's not just a random force. It's connected to this place, to Earth. And we need to understand what we're up against before it's too late." For a moment, the only sound in the cabin was the soft hum of the ship's systems. Then, Merrick let out a long breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're insane, you know that?" "Maybe." I gave him a grim smile. "But if we don't figure this out, we're all dead." He shook his head, but I could see the gears turning in his mind. Despite his reluctance, he knew I was right. Running wasn't an option. Not yet. "All right," he said, pushing himself to his feet. "But we're doing this fast. In and out. No messing around." I nodded, my pulse quickening. We weren't equipped for this. None of us were. But if there was any chance of stopping whatever was coming through that portal, we had to take it. Sarn's voice crackled through the comms again, more urgent this time. "Captain, we've got movement near the portal. It's massive. And it's heading toward us." My stomach dropped. We didn't have time. Whatever was on the other side was crossing through now, and it was coming straight for us. "Get the ship ready," I barked into the comms. "We may need to make a quick escape." Merrick and I moved quickly, gathering what little equipment we had. It wasn't much, just a couple of energy blasters and a small array of scanning tools. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, the enormity of what we were about to face. The airlock hissed open again, and the humid, oppressive air of the forest hit me like a wall. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as we stepped back outside. The forest was eerily quiet now, the tremors from earlier subsiding. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn around, to get back on the ship and leave this place far behind. But I couldn't. Not yet. We moved quickly through the underbrush, the trees towering above us like silent sentinels. The ground was uneven beneath our feet, but we pressed on, guided by the faint glow of the anomaly in the distance. As we reached the clearing where the portal had first appeared, the sight that greeted us sent a chill down my spine. The pillars, once dark and dormant, were now pulsating with a sickly green light. The portal itself had grown larger, its swirling energy casting an eerie glow across the landscape. And there, standing in the center of the clearing, was the creature. It was massive, easily 3 times the height of a man, its form twisted and grotesque. Its body was covered in dark, chitinous plates, its limbs long and angular, but it was the eyes that froze me in place. Deep, sunken pits that glowed with an otherworldly light, filled with a malevolent intelligence that made my blood run cold. It turned its head slowly, its gaze locking onto us. And in that moment, I knew we were in far more danger than we had ever imagined. Merrick cursed under his breath, raising his blaster, but I held out a hand, stopping him. "Wait." "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice barely audible. I didn't answer. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of knowledge we had gathered. The energy readings, the structure, the portal, it was all connected. This creature wasn't just some mindless beast. It was part of something larger, something far more dangerous. The creature took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. The ground trembled beneath its weight, but it didn't attack. Not yet. "Stay calm," I whispered, my eyes never leaving the creature. "It hasn't attacked us. Not yet." Merrick's grip tightened on his blaster, but he didn't fire. He could feel it too. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just a mindless force of destruction. It was calculating, observing, and for the moment, it was waiting. I took a slow, cautious step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "We don't want to fight," I said, my voice steady. "We're just trying to understand." The creature didn't respond, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, calculating. For a long moment, there was only silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, without warning, the ground beneath us shuddered violently. The portal roared to life, its energy swirling faster, brighter. The creature's head snapped toward the vortex, and a low, guttural sound escaped its throat. Something was coming, something even worse than what we were facing now. "We need to move," I said urgently, turning to Merrick. "Now." But before we could react, the portal erupted in a blinding flash of light. The ground split open, and a deafening roar filled the air. We were out of time. The roar of the portal's eruption was deafening. A wall of sound that seemed to press down on us from all sides. The flash of light that had burst from the vortex lingered in the air, casting harsh, flickering shadows across the forest. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I could feel the raw energy from the portal crackling through the air like static. For a moment, we stood frozen, caught between the strange creature in front of us and whatever was about to emerge from the breach. The choice seemed impossible: face the unknown horror coming through the portal, or confront the hulking creature that stood just a few meters away, its dark, insect-like body shifting as if waiting for something. I glanced at Merrick, whose face was taut with tension. His eyes were locked on the creature, his blaster still raised, but I could tell he was as uncertain as I was. We were outmatched in every sense, and both of us knew it. "Move," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the rumble of the earth. "We can't stay here." But even as I said it, the reality of our situation began to settle in. We weren't just outnumbered, we were trapped. The ship was too far behind us now, and with the portal swelling to unpredictable levels, even making it back would be a gamble. The creature let out a low, almost guttural growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air. Its head turned slightly, those deep-set eyes fixating on the swirling portal, as if it too understood the danger that was fast approaching. In a strange, twisted way, it felt like we had a mutual enemy, whatever was coming from the other side. Merrick took a step back, his blaster still pointed at the creature. "What's it waiting for?" he muttered, his voice a mix of fear and confusion. I didn't have an answer. All I could think was that if this thing had wanted to kill us, it would have done so already. Instead, it stood there, motionless except for the slight rise and fall of its chest-like abdomen, watching the portal just as intently as we were. Then, without warning, the creature's head jerked upward. Its elongated arms twitched, and with one swift motion, it pivoted on its back legs, turning its entire body toward the forest behind us. For a moment, I couldn't understand what it was reacting to, but then I heard it too, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, growing closer. Instinctively, Merrick and I both turned to look. Emerging from the shadows of the forest were figures, human figures. At first glance, they looked like soldiers, each clad in dark, tactical gear with weapons slung across their backs. But something was off. They moved too uniformly, too mechanically. Their faces, barely visible under the helmets, were blank, devoid of any emotion or intent. "Who the hell are they?" Merrick breathed, lowering his blaster just slightly. I shook my head, but my pulse quickened. There was no military presence here, no official Earth Defense Force. These men, if they were men at all, were something else. The tension was unbearable. The creature shifted its weight, its attention split between the approaching figures and the portal that continued to churn and pulse with energy. Whatever alliance of non-aggression we had seemed fragile at best, ready to shatter at the slightest provocation. "Back off, slowly," I said under my breath, knowing that we needed to put distance between ourselves and whatever was happening. "Keep your weapon down." Merrick gave me a sharp look, his lips pressed tight, but he complied, taking a step back. I did the same, moving cautiously as the strange soldiers advanced. But then, as if on cue, the soldiers stopped. All at once, their movements ceased, and they stood in place, their heads turning in unison toward the portal. For a long, agonizing moment, none of us moved. The air was thick with the threat of violence, but no one seemed willing to make the first move. And then it happened. The portal, already unstable, surged again. This time, the energy that burst forth wasn't just a blinding light, it was something far worse. A wave of force exploded from the vortex, rippling through the air like a shockwave. The ground split beneath us, sending deep cracks into the earth. Trees shuddered, their massive trunks groaning under the pressure, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of the planet itself straining against the energy. I staggered, barely keeping my footing. Merrick fell to one knee, bracing himself as the tremors rocked the ground. The soldiers, whoever or whatever they were, remained eerily still, seemingly unaffected by the chaos unfolding around them. But the creature, that dark, looming figure, reacted differently. It let out a piercing shriek, a sound so alien and primal that it sent a shiver down my spine. Its body convulsed, and in an instant it turned, retreating into the shadows of the forest. Its massive form moved with astonishing speed, disappearing from sight before I could process what had happened. "Captain," Merrick grunted, pushing himself to his feet. "We need to get out of here, now." He was right. Whatever was coming through the portal was beyond anything we had prepared for. We had to regroup, rethink. But as I glanced back at the figures standing motionless in the clearing, I knew that wasn't going to be easy. And then, without warning, the soldiers moved again. This time, they weren't advancing. They were retreating, just as quickly and mechanically as they had arrived. Within seconds, they were gone, vanishing into the forest just like the creature. "What the hell is going on?" Merrick muttered, rubbing the back of his neck in disbelief. I didn't have an answer. My thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of the strange convergence of events. The portal, the creature, the soldiers, none of it added up. Yet all of it felt connected, as if we had stumbled into something far bigger than ourselves. But before I could speak, the comms crackled to life. "Captain, this is Sarn. We're picking up some seriously unstable energy signatures out here. Whatever's coming through that portal, it's not staying long. You need to get out of there, fast." I grabbed the comms, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "We're on our way back. Get the ship prepped for immediate takeoff." The line went dead, and I turned to Merrick, who was already moving toward the ship. We moved quickly, our steps urgent but measured, knowing that every second counted. The ground continued to tremble beneath us, and I could feel the pulse of the portal growing more erratic with each passing moment. As we reached the ship, I cast one last glance at the clearing. The portal was still there, swirling with unnatural energy, but something had changed. The air around it felt heavier, more oppressive. Whatever was coming through wasn't just an anomaly, it was a force of nature, something that defied everything we understood about the universe. The ship's airlock hissed open, and we rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind us. Merrick was already at the controls, his fingers flying over the console as he powered up the engines. "Get us out of here," I said, my voice tight. "We don't have much time." The ship's thrusters roared to life, and within seconds, we were lifting off, the ground falling away beneath us. The turbulence was worse than I'd expected, the gravitational anomalies wreaking havoc on the ship's stabilizers. But Merrick held steady, his grip firm on the controls as we ascended through the atmosphere. As we broke free from the planet's gravitational pull, I allowed myself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The sensors were still going haywire, the readings off the charts. Whatever had come through that portal wasn't staying on Earth. It was spreading, moving beyond the planet's boundaries. And we had no idea what it was, or how to stop it. I moved to the viewport, staring down at the planet below. The once clear atmosphere was now distorted, rippling with the unnatural energy of the portal. In the distance, I could see it, just a faint glimmer, but unmistakable. The portal had begun to collapse, folding in on itself, but not before something had made its way through. "Captain," Merrick said, his voice low, "we're not alone up here." I looked up, my stomach tightening as I saw what he meant. On the ship's sensors, several unidentified blips had appeared, moving toward us with alarming speed. They weren't human ships, and they certainly weren't part of the Galactic Council's fleet. I turned back to the viewport, my mind racing. Whoever, or whatever, had come through that portal wasn't going to stop at Earth. And now, we were in their path. "We need to warn the Council," I said, my voice hard. "They need to know what's happening." Merrick nodded, but his expression was grim. "And what do we tell them? That we've unleashed something we don't understand? Something we can't control?" I didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear, this was only the beginning. The portal, the creature, the soldiers, everything we had encountered was part of a larger, far more dangerous puzzle, and the pieces were already starting to fall into place. As the ship accelerated through space, leaving Earth behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line, one we could never come back from. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. We had to face it, head on. And this time, we wouldn't be the ones drawing the straws. The ship's hum was steady, familiar. It was a sound that had always grounded me, reminded me of where I was and what I was doing. But now, that sound felt distant, like background noise in a room filled with tension. We were moving away from Earth, but the gravity of what had just happened below pulled at me, as if the planet's weight had found a new way to cling to my mind. Merrick was silent at the controls. His movements were mechanical, his focus absolute, but I knew his thoughts were racing. The mission had shifted from something risky to something bordering on suicidal. We had stepped into an abyss we didn't understand, and it was closing around us, tighter with each second. "Status?" I finally asked, breaking the silence, though I already knew the answer. "Stable for now," Merrick muttered without looking up. His voice was clipped, as if every word was a distraction from the gravity of the task at hand. "But those ships, they're moving faster than anything I've ever seen. No identifiers, no known signatures. It's like they weren't there, and then they just appeared." I nodded, though the unease in my gut tightened. "And they're still coming." He glanced at the readout, his brow furrowing. "Closer. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they catch up. Maybe less, if they decide to push it." I stepped away from the viewport, pacing in the narrow space behind him. The images from Earth flickered in my head, those soldiers, the creature, and the portal. All separate parts of the same enigma, and we were caught in the middle of it. The Galactic Council had known something like this was possible. Their quarantine of Earth, their fear, it wasn't just because of humanity's warlike nature. There was something deeper, something far more ancient that had been waiting for its moment to surface. And now we'd cracked it open. "We need to make contact with the Council," I said, my voice firm but calm. "Warn them about the portal, about what we saw." Merrick let out a low breath, his fingers tapping at the console, setting up a calm link. "You think they'll listen? They've been content to let Earth sit under quarantine for centuries. Suddenly, they'll believe that something's breaking free now." I didn't answer. It wasn't a matter of belief, it was a matter of survival. Whatever had come through that portal wasn't staying confined to Earth. And if those ships chasing us were any indication, we had unleashed something that wasn't interested in negotiating. The calm link crackled to life, a soft hum as it attempted to establish a connection to the Galactic Council's relay station. It was always slow. Even in moments like this, bureaucracy managed to bleed into the technology itself. I sat down across from Merrick, feeling the tension between us like a coiled spring. The familiarity of the ship's interior felt almost claustrophobic now. It wasn't just the chase or the portal, it was the unknown we were hurtling toward. Everything we thought we knew about the galaxy, about ourselves, was about to be upended, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down. "Council link established," Merrick said flatly, turning the console toward me. "They're waiting." I leaned in, taking a deep breath before speaking. "This is Captain Kairos of the Renaissance. We've just returned from a survey of Earth's surface. There's been an anomaly. A portal, energy signatures we've never encountered before. Hostile entities. We need immediate assistance. This is beyond any known threat we've dealt with." There was a brief silence, the kind that comes before bad news. I could hear the faint hum of the connection holding, and then a voice came through, flat and distant. "Captain Kairos, your report is noted. The Council will deliberate and assess the situation. Maintain your position." Merrick let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Deliberate. They'll be dead before they decide to send a scouting party." I cut the link before responding. "We don't have time for them to catch up to reality. They'll either see what's coming and act, or they won't. Either way, we're on our own for now." Merrick gave a curt nod, his hands steady on the controls, but his eyes betrayed him. He was calculating our chances of outrunning those ships, and from the way his jaw tightened, I knew they weren't good. He wasn't wrong. We were moving fast, but the unknown ships had a precision and velocity that made us look like we were crawling. "What's our play, then?" Merrick finally asked, his voice quieter now, as though speaking too loudly would break the thin thread of hope we were holding on to. I thought about it for a moment. The portal wasn't just a phenomenon, it was a message, a declaration from whatever had crossed into our universe. The way it had affected the environment around it, the soldiers, and that creature. It all felt like the first move in a larger game, and we were too close to the center of it. We can't outrun them, I said carefully, but we can't engage them head-on, either. Merrick raised an eyebrow. So what, then? Surrender? I shook my head. We don't know what they want yet, and right now, that's the only advantage we have. He gave me a sideways glance, clearly not liking where this was headed. You're suggesting we wait for them to catch up and, what? Negotiate? Not negotiate. Gather intel. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. They've been shadowing us this whole time without firing a shot. There's something they want from us, whether it's information or leverage, we need to figure it out. Merrick grunted in disapproval, but didn't argue. We both knew the reality, we had limited options, and none of them were good. The minutes ticked by, the silence in the cabin stretching out as the ships drew closer. Every now and then, I'd glance at the console, watching as the distance between us shrank. There were still no comm signals, no weapons fired. Just that unsettling approach, like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, Merrick spoke again, his voice quiet. You ever think about why the Council quarantined Earth in the first place? What they were really afraid of? I leaned back in my seat, staring at the metal ceiling of the ship. Not just humanity. They knew something was buried there, something ancient. The stories of Earth being a death world weren't just about human violence. It was about what that violence was hiding, what it was protecting. Merrick looked at me, and for the first time since we'd launched from the planet, there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. You think the humans knew about it? I shrugged, but the thought had crossed my mind. Maybe they were protecting it. Maybe they were just unlucky. But whatever it is, the Council kept them isolated for a reason, and now we're right in the middle of it. The ship's sensors beeped softly, pulling us both back to the present. The ships were close now, almost within range. I could feel the tension thickening in the air, the silent anticipation of the moment that was about to unfold. Merrick's fingers hovered over the weapon systems, but he didn't activate them. He was waiting for my signal, his posture rigid with the strain of holding back. We hold, I said quietly. No firing unless they make the first move. He nodded, his eyes narrowing as the ships finally came into view outside the viewport. There were 3 of them, sleek and angular, their dark hulls reflecting the distant starlight. They moved with an unsettling grace, their formation tight and deliberate. For a few seconds, they simply hung there, just outside our range, as if sizing us up. Then, slowly, one of the ships began to drift closer, its nose turning slightly as if to face us directly. I felt my pulse quicken, every nerve in my body on edge. The comm crackled to life, but there was no voice, just a series of low, rhythmic pulses, almost like a code, repeating over and over. Merrick glanced at me, his face tense. You recognize that? I shook my head. No, but it's not an attack. Yet. We waited, the silence stretching out painfully as the ships continued to hold their position. The rhythmic pulse on the comms repeated again, and I felt a strange unease settling over me. They're waiting for something, I murmured. Or testing us, Merrick added. The pulse shifted slightly, growing fainter. And then, suddenly, the ships began to move again, this time, not toward us, but away, retreating into the dark void of space as quickly and silently as they had appeared. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ship's sensors continued to track the unknown vessels, but they were moving farther and farther away, disappearing into the distance. They're gone, Merrick finally said, his voice thick with disbelief. I didn't respond immediately. My mind was still trying to process what had just happened. The portal, the soldiers, the creature, everything had led to this moment, but the conclusion was anything but clear. They'll be back, I said finally, my voice quiet. And next time, we won't be so lucky. Merrick leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath. So, what now? I stared out at the vast emptiness of space, my mind spinning with possibilities. There were still so many questions. I stared out at the vast emptiness of space, my mind spinning with possibilities. There were still so many questions, but the immediate concern was clear. We had to figure out what was happening on Earth and how it connected to those mysterious ships. They had not engaged us, but their presence loomed large in the shadows, a reminder that we were not alone in this universe. First, we need to recalibrate our sensors, I said, shifting my focus back to the ship's systems. We need to see if we can pick up any residual energy from that portal. It's possible that the ships were drawn to it or have some connection to whatever came through. Merrick nodded, already initiating the recalibration process. And then what? We don't even know what we're looking for. Then we find out, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We analyze the data we've gathered from the planet, from the creature, and see if there are patterns. There has to be something connecting all of this. The ship hummed around us as Merrick worked at the console. I could see the flickering screens displaying a range of readings, energy fluctuations, spatial anomalies, and more. Every number was a piece of a puzzle that was beginning to feel insurmountable. Here we go, Merrick said, his voice steady as he pulled up the data from the ship's systems. I'm running a sweep of the area. We might pick up something from the portal or those ships. I took a breath, leaning over the console to study the readings. The numbers danced across the screen, each line a thread in a much larger tapestry that I was struggling to comprehend. There were still echoes of energy left behind, signatures that pulsed faintly against the backdrop of space. Isolate those energy signatures, I instructed. We need to analyze their patterns. Merrick's fingers flew over the controls, and the console displayed a series of graphs. The readings fluctuated erratically, almost as if the energy were alive, reacting to some unseen force. It's unstable, he noted, like it's on the verge of collapsing into itself. That's the nature of these anomalies, I said, recalling what I had read in the archives about portals. They're not meant to be stable. They're bridges, temporary pathways that open and close based on cosmic forces. But this one feels different. There's a residual pulse that suggests something came through and left a trace behind. We were silent as the data continued to scroll. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the air was charged with anticipation. The readings were inconsistent, but as I focused, I began to see patterns emerging. Look at this, I said, pointing to a specific spike in the energy signature. This fluctuation aligns with the timing of the creature's appearance on Earth. It's like there's a rhythm to it. Merrick squinted at the screen, his brow furrowing. So, you're saying the creature was somehow linked to the portal? That it was drawn to it? It's a possibility, I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. We need to consider that whatever came through is connected to Earth itself. The question is whether it's hostile or something we need to understand. He leaned back in his chair, contemplating my words. If we want to understand, we'll need to go back to the planet. We can't just run away from this. The thought sent a shiver through me, but I knew he was right. We couldn't simply leave Earth to whatever forces were at play, not after what we had seen. Then let's prepare for another descent, I said, my voice steadying. But we do it cautiously. We gather intel, but we don't engage unless absolutely necessary. We need to get to the bottom of this without provoking anything. Merrick nodded, already preparing the ship for a descent. The ship hummed with energy as he inputted the calculations, setting the trajectory toward Earth once more. The thought of returning filled me with a mix of dread and determination. Do you think the Council will act on our findings? Merrick asked as we descended. Or will they just brush us off again? They will have no choice but to listen this time, I replied, my tone more resolute than I felt. What we've encountered is beyond their understanding, but it's also a threat. They won't ignore that. The descent was slow, but my anticipation felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap. The ship navigated through the clouds, and I watched as the landscape of Earth re-emerged below us, a chaotic blend of beauty and desolation. The remnants of the battle lingered like scars across the terrain. It was a stark reminder of the power humanity wielded, a power that had drawn the attention of something far beyond our understanding. Merrick guided the ship down, and I focused on the scanners, hoping for any sign of life, movement, or something else. The portal was still active, a pulsing presence on the surface, drawing us toward it like a moth to a flame. As we approached, I felt the weight of our mission settling over me, heavy with the burden of uncertainty. We were stepping into a web woven from threads of human history and cosmic mysteries. "Touchdown in 5, Merrick announced, breaking my concentration. His tone was measured, but I could sense the adrenaline in his voice. "Let's run a preliminary scan before we disembark," I ordered. "We need to know if the area is secure." As we sat down, I initiated the external scanners, poring over the data as it streamed in. The readings were still chaotic: unusual energy signatures near the portal, scattered heat sources around the battlefield from the soldiers' confrontation. "The area looks clear for now, but those energy spikes, they're getting stronger," I said, trying to mask the tension rising in my chest. "It's almost as if something else is awakening." Merrick glanced at the readouts, his expression serious. "So, we're not just looking at residual energy from the portal. Something is actively being drawn here." I nodded, the implications weighing heavily. "It's not just about what we saw. Whatever was beneath the surface of Earth is being stirred awake, and we have no idea what it could be." We stood together in silence for a moment, the weight of our discovery sinking in. We were on the edge of something immense, something that could reshape our understanding of the galaxy. "We need to get to the portal," I said, breaking the stillness. "It might give us answers, or at the very least, a clearer picture of what's happening." "Right," Merrick replied, his voice steady. "Let's gear up and move out." The process of preparing felt like a ritual: checking weapons, securing gear, running through protocols that had become second nature. I felt a knot of anxiety and determination settle in my stomach as I reviewed our equipment. We weren't just facing whatever came through that portal, we were facing our own ignorance, our fears, and the possibility that we were venturing into something we might never escape. We moved toward the exit hatch, stepping into the dim light outside. The landscape was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the faint rustling of foliage and the distant echoes of our ship's systems powering down. The remnants of the battlefield lay before us, a mosaic of destruction that felt almost alien. I scanned the area, searching for any signs of movement. "Over here," Merrick said, pointing toward a cluster of trees. That's where the creature appeared. The energy readings were strongest there. As we approached, I felt a chill creeping down my spine. The air was thick with tension, a sense of anticipation that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Stay alert," I whispered, my senses heightened. "We don't know what else might be lurking." We stepped carefully, moving toward the portal. The closer we got, the more the energy signatures danced around us, unpredictable and volatile. The ground felt charged beneath my feet, pulsing with the potential of what lay ahead. The portal shimmered ahead, an anomaly in the fabric of reality itself. Its surface flickered like a mirage, the colors swirling in ways that seemed to defy the laws of nature. I had seen this kind of phenomenon in simulations, but experiencing it firsthand was different. "What do we do?" Merrick asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We observe first," I said, keeping my eyes trained on the portal. "We need to understand how it operates. If we can determine its nature, we might be able to predict what comes next." As we watched, the portal flickered again, the colors intensifying for a brief moment before settling into a steady pulse. It felt alive, as if it was a heartbeat echoing through the air. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our task settle on my shoulders. "Let's set up the equipment. We'll collect data while we analyze the portal's fluctuations." Merrick nodded, moving into action as I pulled out the scanning equipment, setting it up to capture every detail. Each second felt heavy with the anticipation of discovery, the unknown calling to us with an urgency I couldn't ignore. The readings started to pour in, numbers and graphs flashing across the screen. I focused, trying to make sense of the chaos, watching as the portal responded to our presence. The energy readings fluctuated with each pulse, almost as if it was aware of us. There's a pattern emerging, I noted, squinting at the display. Every pulse aligns with the data we collected before. It's like a signal. Could it be a communication of sorts? Merrick suggested, his brow furrowing. Possibly, I replied. But communication with whom? Or what? Before he could respond, the portal surged, sending a shockwave through the air. The ground trembled beneath us, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. The energy signature spiked dramatically on the scanners, a warning bell ringing in my mind. "Get back," I shouted, instinctively pulling Merrick behind a nearby tree as the portal began to ripple violently. "What's happening?" he yelled, trying to steady himself. "It's destabilizing," I replied, scanning the readings frantically. The energy levels were off the charts, a chaotic storm brewing just beyond the shimmering surface. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash, and from the depths of the portal emerged a figure, tall and shrouded in shadow. It stepped into our world with a grace that felt both unnatural and terrifying. I felt the air grow cold around us, my instincts screaming that we had crossed a threshold into a realm we weren't prepared for. "Stay down," I hissed, trying to gather my wits. The figure moved closer, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign. The contours of its features were human-like, but its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, filled with an intelligence that sent a chill racing down my spine. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. The figure paused, tilting its head slightly. Its voice echoed, smooth and melodic, yet tinged with an alien quality. "I am a traveler, drawn by the energy of this realm. You have awakened that which was dormant." "What do you mean?" Merrick asked, still crouched behind the tree. "Your presence has disrupted the balance," it said, gesturing toward the portal. "You are not prepared for the truths that lie beyond." A sudden dread settled over me, and I understood then that we had opened a door that could never be closed. Whatever was happening, it was only the beginning, and we were now part of something far larger than ourselves. "Tell us what we need to do," I said, my voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at me. "We need to understand this situation before it spirals out of control." The figure regarded us silently, its glowing eyes assessing. "Seek the heart of the portal. Only there will you find the answers you seek. But know this, once you enter, there is no turning back." With that, it stepped back into the portal, its form dissolving into the energy swirling within. The blinding light faded, leaving us in an uneasy silence, the weight of its warning echoing in the air. Merrick and I exchanged glances, the gravity of our situation settling heavily between us. "What now?" he asked, his expression a mix of fear and determination. I took a breath, feeling the pulse of the portal calling to me. "We follow. If we want answers, we have to take the plunge." "Together?" he asked, his voice steady. "Together," I confirmed, knowing that whatever lay ahead, we would face it side by side. With resolve, we moved toward the portal, preparing to step into the unknown and confront whatever awaited us on the other side. The truth was out there, and we were about to uncover it, whether we were ready or not. The ship hung in the stillness of space, a small bastion of technology against the vastness that surrounded us. I stood at the viewport, watching as the stars blinked in and out of view, each one a reminder of how insignificant we were against the backdrop of the universe. I felt the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. The mysteries we had uncovered on Earth were only the beginning. "Running diagnostics now," Merrick's voice broke through my thoughts, steady and focused. I turned away from the viewport and stepped back toward the command console. He was hunched over the controls, fingers flying across the interface, a picture of concentration. The glow from the screens reflected off his face, casting sharp shadows. "Any anomalies detected?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Nothing we didn't expect," he replied, glancing up briefly. "But the energy readings from the portal are fluctuating wildly. We're still picking up residual traces from that creature, and it's unsettling. I nodded, understanding the implications. The creature's appearance had disrupted something, awakened forces that might be better left undisturbed. Can we isolate the source of those fluctuations? Merrick turned back to the console, tapping commands into the system. I'll give it a shot. If we can pinpoint where the energy is most concentrated, we might be able to learn more about what it is and whether it poses a threat. As he worked, I turned my gaze back to the viewport. Earth was a distant blue dot now, a planet rich with life and conflict. It was easy to forget the complexities of human existence, the struggles and triumphs, when faced with the vast emptiness of space. Yet, it was humanity's resilience that brought me back to Earth, and now that same resilience seemed threatened. "What do you think will happen when we go back?" Merrick asked suddenly, pulling my attention back to the ship's interior. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we have to be ready for anything. The Council won't take our warnings lightly, especially not after the chaos that unfolded." Merrick's brow furrowed. "They never do until it's too late. We have to prepare them for the reality of what we're dealing with. If those ships return, or if whatever came through the portal becomes a greater threat, we need to act decisively." He was right. Our last encounter with the Council had left a bitter taste. They had dismissed our concerns, believing the portal was just another anomaly in the grand scheme of cosmic happenings. But we both knew that this was different. We were at the edge of something profound, and it was imperative that we tread carefully. "Diagnostics complete," Merrick said, breaking my reverie. "The energy signatures are erratic, but show distinct patterns, like a heartbeat." "A heartbeat?" I repeated, intrigued. "What does that mean?" "It suggests that whatever energy is being emitted isn't random. It's cyclical, almost rhythmic, and there's something else." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he adjusted the readings on the screen. "The energy increases every time the portal opens and closes. It's as if something is trying to communicate, or perhaps even reach out." "Or to warn us," I added, my heart racing at the implication. "If this energy is a signal of some kind, we need to decipher it before it's too late." Merrick nodded, already inputting the data into the ship's analysis programs. "Let's see if we can create a visual representation. Maybe that will help us understand the structure of the energy fluctuations." As he worked, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. It had been a series of choices, each leading us deeper into the unknown. From the moment we discovered the creature on Earth, we had become entwined in a web of interstellar mysteries, and now we were faced with the weight of knowledge that could change everything. "Here we go," Merrick said, pulling up a complex graph on the screen. The lines twisted and turned, forming a pattern that felt almost alive. "This is what we're dealing with. See how the spikes align with each other? It's almost like there's a language to it." "A language," I echoed. The notion intrigued me. If there was a pattern, there might be a way to communicate with whatever was on the other side of that portal. "What if we could respond?" Merrick proposed, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "If we could modulate our signals to match this frequency, we might be able to send a message." "Or provoke a response," I cautioned. "We don't know what we're dealing with. What if it's hostile?" Merrick's expression sobered. "I get that. But we have to explore all options. We're facing something unprecedented. Understanding it might give us a fighting chance." His determination resonated with me, and I found myself leaning toward the idea. "Okay, let's prepare a transmission. But we do it carefully. I want to set up protocols in case things go sideways." Merrick nodded, already moving to configure the ship's systems for our experiment. I watched as he worked, admiring his ability to remain calm under pressure. His confidence was a steadying force, one that reminded me that we weren't alone in this vast expanse. While Merrick focused on the technical aspects, I leaned against the wall, allowing my mind to wander to the creature we had encountered on Earth. It had been both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a reminder that the universe held more than we could comprehend. Its presence had been a catalyst, igniting a chain reaction that we were now struggling to understand. "Ready for the first transmission," Merrick called, pulling me back to the present. I straightened, my heart racing at the thought of reaching out to the unknown. Let's do it. But remember, we monitor everything closely. He nodded and initiated the sequence. The ship's systems hummed with energy as we prepared to send our signal. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. We were crossing a threshold into uncharted territory. The console displayed the transmission wave, a series of pulses that mirrored the patterns we had identified. With a deep breath, Merrick pressed the final command, and the signal shot forth into the void. For a moment, everything was silent. The ship's systems blinked with activity, and I felt the weight of anticipation pressing down. We were standing at the edge of possibility, and what lay beyond that edge was unknown. Then, as if in response to our call, the portal flickered to life, its surface shimmering with energy. The readings on the console began to spike, each pulse resonating with the frequency we had sent. "Look!" Merrick shouted, pointing to the screens. "It's responding." I leaned closer, my heart racing. The energy fluctuations were intensifying, forming a cascade of colors that danced across the displays. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a reminder of how little we truly understood about the universe. The portal flickered again, and this time it didn't feel like just energy. It felt like intention, a force reaching out into the void, eager to make contact. I could feel the tension in the air, a charge that electrified every nerve in my body. "What if it's trying to communicate with us?" Merrick asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then we need to listen," I replied, feeling a pull toward the unknown. "We've opened the door, and now we have to step through." Merrick's fingers danced over the controls, and I felt the ship respond to his commands, ready to engage with whatever awaited us. We were on the brink of a revelation, and I knew that the choices we made next would determine the course of our fate. Suddenly, the portal erupted with light, blinding us for a moment. I shielded my eyes, feeling a rush of wind sweep through the cabin. When I opened my eyes again, the scene before us had changed. Emerging from the portal was a figure, luminous and ethereal, its form shifting and flickering as if made from pure energy. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a mix of fear and wonder at the sight. "Do you see that?" Merrick breathed, his voice tinged with awe. "I do," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment settle over us. "What do we do now?" The figure hovered before us, its presence commanding and yet inviting. It radiated energy that resonated with the patterns we had observed, and I felt an instinctual pull toward it. We approached carefully, I decided, stepping closer to the console. We have to establish a connection, but we do it with caution. As we prepared to engage, the figure began to pulse in rhythm with the energy signatures, a silent dialogue taking shape. I could sense its curiosity, a desire to understand us as much as we sought to understand it. "Try modulating our signals again," I instructed Merrick, keeping my gaze locked on the figure. "Let's see if we can sync our frequencies." He nodded, fingers flying over the controls again as he adjusted the settings. The air around us buzzed with energy, and I felt the anticipation building, a tension that promised something profound. The figure shimmered as we established the new signal, the light intensifying with each pulse. It felt as if we were on the verge of breaking through a barrier, stepping into a realm of understanding that had long eluded us. "Here goes," Merrick said, and with a final command, we sent the new signal into the void. The response was immediate. The figure pulsed again, this time in perfect sync with our signal. It felt as if we were sharing a moment of clarity, a connection that transcended language. "What do you think it's trying to tell us?" Merrick wondered aloud. "I think it wants to understand us," I replied, captivated by the exchange. "We're not just sending a signal, we're inviting it to join us in this conversation." As the dialogue continued, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this encounter could change everything. The mysteries of the universe felt within reach, and for the first time, I sensed that we were not alone in our quest for understanding. But as I watched the figure, I also felt an undercurrent of caution. This was a delicate moment, and we needed to tread carefully. The unknown held both promise and peril, and we had to navigate it with care. Let's try to convey who we are, I suggested. We need to share our intentions and our struggles. If this being can comprehend our context, maybe it can help us. Merrick nodded, adjusting the signal once more. Together, we began to craft a message that reflected our existence, the duality of our nature, and the challenges we faced. It was a task filled with uncertainty, but also one that felt necessary. As we prepared to send the message, the portal pulsed with energy, the figure shimmering in anticipation. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around us. "This is it," I said, looking at Merrick. "We're on the verge of something profound." "Together," he affirmed, and with that, we sent our message into the void, a beacon of our intentions reaching out to the cosmos. For a moment, everything felt suspended in time. The ship hummed with energy, and I could feel the weight of possibility in the air. We had crossed a threshold, and now we were faced with the potential for understanding that could change everything. The ship floated in the void, a fragile shell against the backdrop of the universe. Inside, the hum of machinery provided a steady heartbeat, a reminder that we were alive and pushing forward despite the uncertainties ahead. I stood by the main console, my eyes scanning the screens displaying a kaleidoscope of data. The portal flickered softly, its energy pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to echo my own heartbeat. "Are we ready to run another test?" Merrick asked, his voice steady as he adjusted the settings. He was a steady presence, focused and methodical in a way that grounded me during moments of uncertainty. "Let's review the last transmission first," I replied, drawing in a deep breath. "I want to make sure we're not overlooking anything." Merrick nodded, pulling up the data from our last encounter. The lines on the graph shifted and danced across the screen, a representation of the energy we had sent and received. Each spike and trough told a story, revealing the complexity of the phenomena we were trying to understand. "It's still amazing," I said, tracing my finger over the chart. "This communication pattern, it's almost like we're deciphering a language, piece by piece." "Exactly," Merrick replied. "And if we can crack that code, we might get closer to understanding what we're dealing with. But we need to be careful. We don't fully grasp the implications of what we're facing." He was right. Our previous attempts to communicate had only scratched the surface. The figure we encountered had felt more like an echo than a being, its presence a reflection of our own attempts at understanding. Yet the energy it emitted resonated with something deeper, something that pulled at the edges of my consciousness. "Let's prepare a new signal," I said, feeling a sense of urgency. "But this time, we should include a broader range of frequencies. We need to capture the full spectrum of our findings, not just a single thread." Merrick began to modify the parameters, his fingers flying over the console. I watched him work, appreciating his attention to detail. Each adjustment he made brought us closer to forming a connection with whatever lay beyond that portal. As he focused on the technical aspects, I found my mind wandering back to Earth. It was a planet teeming with life and conflict, a place rich with stories yet to be told. I recalled the conversations we had shared with the Council, their dismissive attitudes leaving a bitter taste. They had viewed our discoveries as mere curiosities rather than warnings, and now we stood at a precipice that could alter the course of human existence. "Do you think they'll listen if we go back?" I asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped us. "After everything that's happened, will they finally take us seriously?" Merrick paused, glancing up from the console. "They might, but only if we bring irrefutable evidence. This isn't just about proving our point, it's about survival. We need to demonstrate that the forces we're dealing with are real and present." His words weighed heavily on me. The stakes had never been higher, and we were caught in a race against time. If we didn't act soon, the portal might close, taking with it our only chance to understand this new reality. "Let's make sure our next transmission is clear," I said, pushing aside my doubts. "We have to convey the urgency of our situation. The Council must comprehend the risks involved." Merrick nodded, shifting his focus back to the console. The screens glowed brighter as he continued to refine the signal. I stepped back, allowing my thoughts to drift toward the possibilities that lay ahead. What if we could reach across that divide and create a dialogue, What could we learn from a being that transcended our understanding of life and existence? The ship hummed softly, a reminder of our fragile state in the universe. As we prepared to send our next transmission, I felt a surge of determination. This was not just about communication, it was about forging a connection with the unknown. "Ready for the next test?" Merrick asked, his voice steady and calm. "Let's do it," I replied, my pulse quickening with anticipation. "Send the signal." He initiated the sequence, and the ship shuddered momentarily as the transmission pulsed into the void. The screens displayed the response, and I felt a tension building in the air as we awaited a reply. For a moment, silence enveloped us. The energy fluctuated, and I could sense a connection forming, a thin thread binding us to whatever lay beyond the portal. The ship vibrated softly, and I felt the tension coiling like a spring. Then, as if in answer to our call, the portal erupted with light. The luminous figure emerged again, its form shifting and changing, an amalgamation of colors that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It pulsed in sync with the energy readings, responding to our signal with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Do you see that?" Merrick said, his voice filled with awe. "I do," I replied, captivated by the sight before us. "It's responding. We're making a connection." The figure hovered in front of us, and I felt the weight of its presence. It was a reminder of our own insignificance, yet at the same time, it felt like an invitation to engage. This was a being of pure energy, existing in a form we couldn't fully comprehend. "What do we do now?" Merrick asked, glancing between the figure and the console. "We continue to communicate," I said, feeling a sense of urgency. "Let's keep the frequency aligned and see if we can develop a pattern." Merrick nodded and began adjusting the signal again. The figure responded with a gentle pulse, its energy ebbing and flowing like the tide. I felt drawn to it, as if it were calling out to us in a language we were just beginning to understand. As we maintained the connection, I couldn't help but ponder the implications of this interaction. What did it mean for us as a species? Were we on the brink of uncovering truths that had been hidden for eons, or were we merely playing with forces beyond our comprehension? The portal flickered, and I felt a rush of excitement. It was as if the universe itself was urging us to explore further, to peel back the layers of reality and discover what lay beneath. "Let's try sending more data," I suggested, my mind racing with possibilities. "We can share our history, our knowledge. Maybe it will help the figure understand who we are." Merrick agreed, and together we began to compile a transmission that encapsulated our existence. We included our technological advancements, our cultures, and our struggles. Each piece of information felt like a building block, a way to bridge the gap between our worlds. As we finalized the transmission, I glanced at the figure hovering before us. Its energy pulsed gently, a response that felt almost like anticipation. We were standing at the edge of understanding, and I knew that whatever happened next could change everything. "Ready?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Ready," Merrick replied, his expression determined. We sent the transmission into the void, and the figure responded with a surge of energy, enveloping us in light. For a moment, the world around us seemed to dissolve, and I felt as though we were suspended in a realm beyond time and space. When the light faded, we found ourselves staring at the figure, which now shimmered with an intensity that was both beautiful and intimidating. I sensed a shift in the atmosphere, as if the very fabric of reality was bending around us. "What is it trying to tell us?" Merrick asked, his voice filled with awe. "I think it's showing us something," I replied, captivated by the display. The figure pulsed in a rhythmic pattern, and I realized that it was trying to convey a message that transcended language, steeped in an understanding that was both ancient and profound. "Can you decipher it?" Merrick inquired, leaning closer to the console. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But if we can sync our systems with its frequency, we might be able to interpret what it's saying." Merrick set to work, adjusting the console to match the figure's energy signature. As he did, the pulsing light intensified, and I felt the weight of the moment settle around us. We were on the verge of something monumental, and I could feel the air crackling with anticipation. Almost there, Merrick said, his fingers dancing over the controls. Just a bit more. With one final adjustment, the screen flickered, and the energy readings began to align. The figure's light pulsed in sync with our system, and I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. I began, but the words caught in my throat. The figure shimmered, and suddenly, I was inundated with sensations and images, flashes of ancient civilizations, moments of creation, and the threads that wove together the fabric of existence. It was overwhelming, and I felt myself drawn into the experience, a torrent of knowledge rushing through me. "Can you see it?" Merrick asked, his voice filled with excitement. "I can," I whispered, feeling the weight of the revelations pressing down. "It's showing us history. It's history. It's as if we're glimpsing the origins of life itself." The visions continued, swirling in an intricate dance. I caught glimpses of worlds being born and civilizations rising and falling. Each image painted a picture of struggle and perseverance, of beings searching for meaning in the vast expanse of the universe. "What does it mean?" Merrick asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's trying to convey the interconnectedness of all things," I said, my heart racing as I grasped the significance. "Every action, every choice ripples across the fabric of existence. We're part of a larger narrative, a story that spans eons." The figure pulsed in agreement, its light brightening as if urging us to understand the implications of this shared existence. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. We were part of a continuum, and our choices mattered. "Can we communicate this to others?" Merrick asked, his eyes wide with possibility. "Yes," I replied, my mind racing with the potential. "If we can record this, if we can bring it back to Earth, maybe we can change the way people perceive their place in the universe." We had the opportunity to alter the course of humanity's understanding, to bridge the gap between worlds and open the door to new possibilities. This was no longer just about survival, it was about understanding our role in the cosmic dance of existence. "Let's document everything," I said, urgency in my voice. "We have to ensure this knowledge is not lost." As we worked to capture the experience, I felt the figure's energy shift. It pulsed in a way that felt both familiar and foreign, as if it were acknowledging our efforts. I glanced at Merrick, and we exchanged a silent understanding. This was a pivotal moment in our journey. With each passing second, the connection deepened, and I felt the boundaries of our existence blur. We were becoming more than just observers. We were participants in this unfolding narrative. "Do you feel it?" I asked, the air around us charged with energy. "Yes," Merrick replied, a sense of wonder in his voice. "It's as if we're part of something much larger." The figure pulsed again, and the visions returned, now clearer and more vivid. I could see the threads that connected every being, every moment in time, a web of existence that transcended understanding. It was humbling and awe-inspiring, a reminder that we were never truly alone. "Let's make sure we preserve this," I insisted. "We need to carry it back with us." As we worked to document the experience, I realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, but we had taken a monumental step toward understanding the universe and our place within it. "Are you ready to return?" Merrick asked, his voice steady. I nodded, the gravity of the moment pressing down on us. "Yes, but we need to ensure we're prepared for what lies ahead. We have to be ready to face the Council and convey what we've learned." With that, we focused on solidifying the data, knowing that our next steps would determine the future of humanity's relationship with the cosmos. We were not merely explorers, we were messengers of a truth that could reshape our understanding of existence. As we finished documenting the experience, the figure pulsed one last time, a final acknowledgement of our connection. I felt a warmth enveloping me, a reassurance that we were on the right path. "Thank you," I whispered, not entirely sure if it could understand the sentiment. But deep down, I felt that this moment would resonate across the void, a testament to our shared existence. With a final pulse, the figure began to fade, and the portal shimmered, preparing to close. I felt a pang of loss, but I also recognized the significance of this encounter. We were returning to our world with knowledge that could change everything. "Let's go home," I said, determination settling in my chest. Together, we prepared to return, the weight of our journey heavy yet filled with promise. The ship hummed softly as we transitioned through the portal, leaving behind the ethereal presence that had revealed the mysteries of existence. I felt the familiar pull of gravity as we re-entered the space we called home. As we approached Earth, the ship's systems began to stabilize, and the screens flickered to life, displaying the familiar landscape of our planet. I watched in silence, a mix of anticipation and apprehension filling the space between us. What would await us below? "Prepare for descent," Merrick instructed, his voice steady and calm. I nodded, but my mind was racing. How would we convey the significance of what we had experienced? How could we make the Council understand that this was not just another mission, but a pivotal moment in our existence? As we descended, the familiar blue and green hues of Earth grew clearer, a stark contrast to the emptiness we had just traversed. It felt surreal, the weight of our discoveries pressing heavily on my shoulders. "Are you ready?" Merrick asked, breaking the silence. "I don't think I'll ever be ready," I admitted, my voice laced with uncertainty. "But we have to do this. We owe it to everyone." He nodded, his expression resolute. "Let's ensure our findings are heard." With that, we prepared for our landing, the ship shaking slightly as we touched down. The engines hummed, settling into silence as we powered down. I took a moment to breathe, grounding myself before facing what lay ahead. Stepping out of the ship felt like stepping into a different reality. The air was thick with the sense of Earth, fresh and invigorating yet tainted with the familiar undertones of conflict. I could see the Council's representatives waiting, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. As we approached them, I felt the weight of our journey bearing down. This was it, the moment where we would share our revelations, our truths, and perhaps alter the course of our species. "Welcome back," one of the Council members said, her tone neutral. "Thank you," I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "We have important findings to share." "Let's hear them," another Council member said, his arms crossed over his chest. Taking a deep breath, I began to recount our experience. I shared the knowledge we had gained, the connection we had forged with the being beyond the portal, and the understanding of our place in the universe. As I spoke, I could see their expressions shift, from skepticism to intrigue. "This is substantial," one member finally said, glancing at the others. "If what you're saying is true, it changes everything." "We have to act on this knowledge," Merrick added, his voice strong and confident. "We can't afford to ignore the implications of our discovery." The Council members exchanged glances, and I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Perhaps they were finally beginning to grasp the significance of what we had encountered. "Let's set up a meeting to discuss this further," one of the Council members said, a hint of urgency in her voice. "We need to ensure our next steps align with this new understanding." As the discussions began, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had come back not just with knowledge, but with a purpose, a reason to advocate for our connection to the cosmos. The meeting continued, voices mingling in a tapestry of ideas and possibilities. I remained focused, committed to ensuring our experience would not be lost in the noise. The journey was far from over, it was only just beginning. We had opened the door to a new understanding, and I knew that together, we would navigate the complexities of our existence, forging a path into the unknown. In that moment, I realized the importance of what lay ahead. Our journey through the portal had not only revealed the mysteries of the universe, but had illuminated our own path forward. The weight of the past felt lighter, and I could see the potential for growth and understanding. As I engaged in conversations with the Council, I felt the connections forming, the threads weaving together as we explored the implications of our findings. There was an urgency, but also a sense of hope, a recognition that we were part of something greater. We were all grappling with the complexity of existence, but now we could do so with the knowledge that we were not alone. The cosmos had reached out to us, and it was our responsibility to embrace that connection and carry it forward. "Let's not forget what we've learned," I reminded the Council as discussions continued late into the evening. This is our opportunity to redefine our existence and shape our future." The room fell silent for a moment, and I could see the weight of my words sinking in. We were at a crossroads, and how we chose to move forward would determine the trajectory of our understanding and our place in the universe. As I looked around the room, I felt a surge of determination. We would face the challenges ahead with the knowledge we had gained, and we would not shy away from the responsibility that came with it. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that we had taken the first step toward understanding the secrets of the universe. The meeting room buzzed with muted conversations as council members gathered, their faces marked by lines of experience and the weight of their responsibilities. The room was dimly lit, with a long table at its center, strewn with data pads and holographic displays. I took a moment to steady my breath, the air heavy with anticipation and the potential for change. This was not just another meeting. It was a pivot point for humanity, a chance to reshape our understanding of the universe and our place within it. Merrick stood beside me, his posture relaxed but his eyes focused. He had always been the calm in turbulent situations, a grounding presence when uncertainty threatened to overwhelm. I appreciated his steadiness now, as I felt the gravity of our revelations weighing heavily on my shoulders. The council president, a woman with silver hair and sharp features, looked at us expectantly. Her gaze was piercing, as if she were assessing not just our words but our resolve. "You've returned from your mission," she stated, her voice even and controlled. "I trust you have substantial findings to report." I nodded, glancing at Merrick before stepping forward. "We do. What we experience transcends mere data. It is a shift in understanding, a recognition of our interconnectedness with the cosmos." My voice was steady, but inside, I felt the urgency of our discoveries pressing against my chest. The council members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to curiosity. I took a deep breath, knowing that clarity was crucial. During our journey, we encountered a being, a consciousness that exists beyond our current understanding. It shared with us insights into the nature of existence, the interconnectedness of all things. One of the younger council members raised an eyebrow. "A being? Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? How did this interaction take place?" I glanced at Merrick, who nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. "It wasn't a physical meeting. We entered a portal, a space where dimensions intersect. There, we perceived this consciousness as a pulsating energy, a form that seemed to communicate through feelings and impressions rather than words. It revealed to us the web of existence, how every action, every choice ripples across the fabric of reality." The murmurs around the table intensified, and I could see the council members processing the implications of what I was saying. The president's expression softened, a flicker of intrigue breaking through her initial skepticism. "And this web, what does it mean for us? For humanity?" "It means," I continued, feeling the weight of the moment, "that our choices matter more than we've ever understood. We are part of a continuum, a larger narrative that stretches through time and space." The being conveyed a sense of urgency, of responsibility. If we can comprehend our interconnectedness, we can begin to alter the trajectory of our species. Silence enveloped the room as the implications of my words settled in. I could see the council members exchanging glances, weighing the enormity of the revelations. The atmosphere was charged, a blend of skepticism and hope intertwining in the air. "What you're suggesting is profound," the president said finally, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "But how do we translate this understanding into actionable steps? How do we ensure that our species acknowledges this new reality?" Merrick stepped forward, his confidence radiating in the room. "We need to engage the public, start a dialogue. We must show them that their actions, no matter how small, contribute to this larger narrative. If we can instill a sense of responsibility in everyone, we can begin to foster a new era of understanding and cooperation." Another council member, a grizzled man with deep lines etched into his face, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This sounds idealistic. People are resistant to change, especially when it challenges their beliefs. How do you propose we overcome that?" Through education and transparency, I replied, my tone firm. We have to present the findings clearly and compellingly. We must share the knowledge we gained, the connection we established. If people can grasp the reality of our interconnectedness, they may be more willing to embrace it. The discussions began to swirl around the room, voices mingling as ideas bounced back and forth. I focused on the unfolding dialogue, watching as the council members wrestled with the implications of our discoveries. This was the complexity of leadership, the balancing act between hope and skepticism, idealism and realism. As the conversation continued, I felt a sense of purpose settle over me. We were navigating uncharted waters, but there was a collective determination in the room. The atmosphere was thick with possibility, each member contributing their perspectives, slowly crafting a plan to bridge the gap between our revelations and public understanding. At some point, a member raised the concern of potential backlash. What if this knowledge destabilizes existing power structures? There are those who thrive on ignorance. I could see the hesitation in the room, the fear of the unknown creeping in. Change is always unsettling, I acknowledged, but we cannot let fear dictate our actions. Ignorance may offer temporary comfort, but it also perpetuates suffering. If we can present this understanding as a pathway to a better future, we can counteract that fear. Merrick added, it's about framing the narrative. Instead of viewing this as a threat, we need to present it as an opportunity for growth and unity. The council members leaned into the discussion, their expressions shifting as they considered the potential paths forward. It was clear we were at a crossroads, a moment of choice that could influence the trajectory of our species. The discussions ebbed and flowed, each voice adding depth to the conversation. Time stretched on, the room filled with the energy of ideas being forged and reshaped. I felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily upon me, but it was balanced by a burgeoning sense of hope. We had faced the unknown and returned with knowledge that could alter the course of humanity. It was no small feat, and I was acutely aware of the stakes involved. As the meeting wore on, I could sense a shift in the mood. The council members began to unite around the idea of a public engagement strategy. They were ready to embrace the complexity of our findings and find ways to share them with the broader community. Let's draft a proposal, the president finally said, her voice resolute. We'll outline our findings, the implications, and our plan for public engagement. It's time to bridge the gap between our discoveries and the people we serve. Merrick and I exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that we were making progress. This was the first step toward a larger transformation, a chance to connect humanity with the universe in a profound way. The meeting continued, details emerging as the council members rallied around a common goal. The atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to determination, each voice becoming part of a larger narrative we were beginning to weave together. As discussions progressed, I took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought us here. It had started with a mission, an exploration of the cosmos, but it had transformed into something deeper. We had encountered a being that challenged our understanding of existence, and now we stood on the precipice of change, ready to share that knowledge with the world. After hours of dialogue, the meeting finally drew to a close. The council members exchanged words of encouragement, acknowledging the significance of the path they had set in motion. As I stepped out into the corridor with Merrick, the weight of the moment lingered, but it was now accompanied by a sense of purpose. We did it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We've started something. Merrick nodded, a smile breaking through his usual calm demeanor. This is just the beginning. We need to keep the momentum going. The real work starts now. I agreed, feeling the urgency of our task. We had taken the first steps toward reshaping humanity's understanding of existence, but there was much to be done. The Council's decision to engage the public was just the foundation. We had to ensure the message was clear and compelling. As we made our way through the bustling corridors of the Council building, I could see the energy of the day reflected in the faces of those we passed. Conversations buzzed around us, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. It was clear that change was in the air, and we were at the center of it. Once outside, we stepped into the sprawling plaza. the sun casting a warm glow over the city. I paused for a moment, taking in the sight of people going about their lives, oblivious to the monumental shift that was unfolding just beyond their awareness. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. How would they react to our revelations? Would they be ready to embrace a new understanding of their existence? "Are you ready for this?" Merrick asked, breaking me from my thoughts. I glanced at him, noting the determination etched on his face. "Ready or not, we have to be. This is what we signed up for." Merrick nodded, and we began to discuss our next steps. We needed to formulate a comprehensive plan to engage the public, to craft messages that resonated with their experiences while conveying the depth of our discoveries. It was a daunting task, but I felt a sense of clarity emerge as we discussed our approach. "We should start with educational outreach," I suggested. "Community workshops, public forums, places where we can share our findings directly with people and address their concerns." Merrick agreed. "We can use social media to amplify our message. Visuals, videos, anything to make it accessible. We need to break down the complexities into digestible pieces." In the following days, we worked tirelessly, crafting presentations and planning community events. We reached out to schools, community centers, and local organizations, eager to share our insights and initiate discussions. It was exhilarating to see the community respond, their curiosity piqued by the promise of a new perspective. The first workshop was scheduled for the weekend, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves as I prepared. The venue was a small community center, its walls adorned with local artwork and photographs. It felt intimate, a place where conversations could unfold naturally. As the day approached, we gathered materials, setting up displays that showcased our findings. I wanted to create an inviting space where people could engage with the information without feeling overwhelmed. It was essential to make them feel included in this journey. When the day arrived, I arrived early, setting up the room. Would people come? Would they be open to what we had to share? As the doors opened, the first attendees trickled in, a diverse group of people curious about what we had to say. I welcomed them warmly, eager to create an atmosphere where they felt comfortable asking questions and sharing their thoughts. The workshop began with a brief introduction, laying the groundwork for the discussions to follow. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I shared our experiences, the revelations we had encountered, and the importance of recognizing our interconnectedness. I watched as expressions shifted from confusion to intrigue, the flicker of understanding lighting up their faces. As the presentation progressed, people began to engage more actively. Questions emerged, challenging me to clarify and deepen my explanations. I welcomed their inquiries, aware that this dialogue was essential for bridging the gap between our discoveries and their understanding. I could see the hesitance fade as people started to share their own stories, moments when they felt a sense of connection, times when their choices had rippled through their lives and the lives of others. It was a powerful experience, witnessing this shift in perspective. The room felt alive with energy, a collective realization dawning on us all. The stories intertwined, creating a tapestry of shared experiences that reinforced our message. I could feel the weight of responsibility lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. As the workshop drew to a close, I looked around the room, seeing faces transformed by the discussions we had shared. There was a sense of community that had emerged, a recognition that we were all part of something larger. Merrick and I exchanged satisfied glances, knowing that we had taken significant steps toward fostering understanding. The workshop had ignited a spark, a willingness to engage with the complexities of our existence. Afterward, we gathered feedback, eager to learn how we could improve future engagements. With each step, I felt the pulse of possibility, an acknowledgement that we were not just individuals navigating the universe, but part of a collective, shaping the narrative of existence together. As we walked through the bustling streets, the city alive with activity, I felt the weight of our discoveries settling into a sense of responsibility. The public engagement had begun, and the true work was just unfolding. Together, we would continue to bridge the gap between our revelations and the people we served, nurturing a movement rooted in understanding and interconnectedness. As the weeks progressed, our efforts began to take shape. growing from that first workshop into a series of engagements that reached broader audiences. Merrick and I coordinated presentations at local schools, community centers, and even online forums. Each session felt like a building block, slowly crafting a foundation of understanding among the people. Our presentations varied in format. Some were structured lectures, while others took on a more interactive approach. We often invited guest speakers, including educators and local leaders, who shared their insights on community and cooperation. The more diverse our presentations became, the more engaged the audience appeared. It was during one of our school visits that I first realized the profound impact we were having. A group of high school students filled the auditorium, their faces a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. I took a deep breath, recalling my own hesitations at their age. I wanted to break through that barrier, to show them that this wasn't just theoretical, this was relevant to their lives. I began by sharing the story of our encounter, detailing not just the information we had gleaned, but also the emotional weight of that experience. Imagine standing before a being that transcends time and space, I began. In that moment, it wasn't just about what was said, it was about how it felt, an overwhelming sense of connection, a realization that we are all part of something greater. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift. Skepticism softened into contemplation. I encouraged them to think about their own lives, the small choices that led to significant consequences. I asked them to share moments when they felt connected to others or influenced by a seemingly minor event. A girl in the front row raised her hand, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. I was bullied in middle school. It felt isolating, like I was invisible. But one day, someone just smiled at me. That simple gesture changed everything for me. It made me feel seen. Her words resonated through the auditorium. I nodded, appreciating her bravery in sharing such a personal moment. "That's a perfect example," I replied. A single action, even a smile, can ripple through someone's life. We often underestimate our influence. Another student, a boy with a thoughtful expression, interjected. "But what about the bad choices? Don't those matter too? If one person makes a mistake, it can hurt others. What if someone makes a choice that causes pain?" I considered his question carefully. That's true. Every choice we make carries weight, both good and bad. But recognizing our interconnectedness gives us a chance to be more mindful of those choices. We can learn from mistakes, understand their impact, and strive to make better decisions in the future. It's about fostering empathy. As the conversation unfolded, the atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to engagement. They began to discuss their own experiences, sharing stories of kindness, regret, and growth. I felt a sense of accomplishment as their voices blended, creating a dialogue that was rich with perspective. After the session, students approached us with questions and comments, eager to dive deeper into the ideas we had presented. It was exhilarating to witness their enthusiasm, the spark of curiosity igniting before me. This was the transformation we sought, a shift in perspective that could lead to a more compassionate community. As we left the school that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The students' reactions reinforced the importance of our mission. We were creating a dialogue that challenged conventional thinking, inviting people to explore the depth of their connections. Over the next few weeks, we expanded our outreach efforts further. Social media became a vital tool for spreading our message, enabling us to reach even those who couldn't attend our sessions. We created short videos highlighting key concepts from our discussions, encouraging viewers to reflect on their own experiences. Merrick's knack for engaging visuals helped us craft eye-catching content that resonated with a broader audience. We featured stories from individuals who had found connection and meaning in unexpected places. The response was overwhelmingly positive, sparking conversations that spilled beyond our immediate circles. However, not everything unfolded smoothly. With the increasing attention came skepticism and criticism from some quarters. A faction within the community began to question the validity of our findings, dismissing our claims as fanciful or overly idealistic. They argued that focusing on interconnectedness could detract from individual accountability. I felt the tension brewing beneath the surface, and we prepared ourselves for potential backlash. It was a reality we had anticipated. Change often invites resistance. During a community forum, I encountered the first wave of that opposition. As I stood at the podium, I sensed the room's unease. People shifted in their seats, eyes darting between me and the council members seated nearby. I had prepared a presentation, intending to share recent findings and highlight stories of connection, but I could feel the weight of skepticism looming over me. A voice rang out from the crowd. "This all sounds nice in theory, but what about the real issues we face? You're talking about feeling connected, but people are still struggling. Families are breaking apart, communities are divided. How does this help us?" I took a breath, grounding myself. This was a moment to engage, not to retreat. "You're right. We are facing significant challenges, and acknowledging them is crucial. But this understanding of interconnectedness doesn't negate those issues. Rather, it offers a lens through which we can address them." The room hummed with mixed reactions. Some nodded in agreement, while others frowned in disbelief. If we can recognize the impact of our choices on each other, we can begin to create solutions together. It's not about ignoring individual struggles. It's about fostering a sense of community that supports us all. Another voice chimed in, this one more confrontational. "But isn't that just a way to excuse bad behavior? If we focus too much on how we're all connected, aren't we letting people off the hook for their actions?" I acknowledged the concern, realizing that addressing it head-on was essential. "No, it's about accountability. Understanding our interconnectedness does not absolve us of responsibility. It enhances our ability to hold each other accountable. When we see how our actions affect others, we become more inclined to act thoughtfully and compassionately." The dialogue shifted, and I felt a mix of tension and engagement. People were beginning to grapple with the complexities of our message. It was a crucial moment, one that could either solidify or fracture our efforts. We left that evening feeling the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. The pushback we faced was daunting, yet it also illustrated the importance of the work we were doing. Change would not come without challenge, and it was our responsibility to navigate those complexities thoughtfully. In the days that followed, we regrouped to discuss how to address the opposition. "We need to refine our message," Merrick suggested during our planning session. "We can't shy away from the difficult conversations. We have to acknowledge the challenges people face while also emphasizing the potential for connection." I nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his words. We should share more stories of how connection has led to positive change. Real-life examples can help bridge that gap. As we strategized, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We would not allow dissent to deter us. Instead, we would lean into it, embracing the complexities of our mission. With each new session and forum, we refined our approach, balancing our core message with an acknowledgement of the real struggles people faced. We highlighted stories of resilience, showcasing individuals and communities that had come together to overcome adversity. Our outreach efforts took on new forms. Community service projects emerged from our discussions, providing tangible examples of connection in action. We organized volunteer opportunities, inviting people to work side by side to address local issues. I watched as community members began to engage more actively. Neighbors who had previously been strangers came together, united by a shared purpose. The sense of connection we had hoped to inspire was beginning to take root. During one of these projects, a group of volunteers gathered to clean up a local park. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and camaraderie as we worked side by side, sharing stories while we collected trash and planted flowers. In the midst of it all, I noticed a young boy, no older than 8, helping an elderly woman plant a flower. They chatted animatedly, their conversation punctuated by laughter. It was a small moment, but it symbolized the very essence of what we were striving to achieve, bridging generational gaps, fostering connection, and creating a sense of community. Afterward, we held a brief reflection session, inviting everyone to share their thoughts on the day. As people spoke, it became clear that these shared experiences were deepening their understanding of interconnectedness. A middle-aged man shared, "I didn't think I'd enjoy this, I came to get my community service hours, but seeing everyone come together has changed my perspective. We really can make a difference when we work together." I felt a surge of hope at his words. This was the kind of engagement we sought, a recognition that connection could lead to meaningful change. The park had transformed from a neglected space into a vibrant symbol of our community's potential. As our outreach continued, I realized that the challenges we faced were essential to our growth. Each encounter, whether positive or contentious, pushed us to refine our message and adapt our approach. The dialogue was evolving, and we were learning alongside our community. However, the road was not without obstacles. The backlash we faced persisted, manifesting in articles and social media posts that questioned our motives and credibility. Some individuals portrayed our efforts as naive, suggesting that focusing on interconnectedness would distract from the systemic issues plaguing our society. I felt the weight of that criticism, but it only fueled my resolve. I understood the importance of addressing these concerns openly. Merrick and I decided to hold a town hall meeting, inviting community members to voice their opinions and engage in an honest dialogue. As we prepared for the meeting, I reviewed our objectives. We need to emphasize that acknowledging interconnectedness doesn't dismiss individual struggles, I said to Merrick. It's about creating a framework for understanding how we can support one another. The night of the town hall arrived, and I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The venue was packed, the air thick with tension. I stood at the front, ready to facilitate the discussion, aware of the skepticism that lingered. As the meeting began, I opened the floor to questions and comments. The first voice to rise was familiar, the man who had challenged me at the previous forum. Why should we focus on how we're all connected when there are real problems that need fixing? Isn't this just a distraction? I recognized the importance of addressing his concerns head-on. That's a valid point. We are indeed facing significant challenges, but I believe that understanding our interconnectedness can help us find solutions to those issues. By working together, we can address problems more effectively. Another community member added, "But what about accountability? It sounds nice to talk about connection, but what about people who don't take responsibility for their actions?" I nodded, grateful for the opportunity to clarify our stance. Accountability is crucial. We're not suggesting that bad actions should go unaddressed. Rather, we're emphasizing the need for a broader perspective. When we understand how our choices impact others, we become more inclined to act responsibly. As the discussion continued, the atmosphere began to shift. More voices joined the conversation, expressing a range of opinions. Some shared their frustrations, while others articulated the importance of community. It was a complex tapestry of thoughts, reflecting the intricacies of our society. By the end of the evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment. While not everyone was convinced, the dialogue had opened doors for deeper engagement. People were grappling with the complexities of our message, and that was a crucial step forward. In the following weeks, we continued our outreach efforts, incorporating the feedback we had received. Our sessions became more nuanced, addressing not only the power of connection, but also the real challenges people faced. We highlighted stories of resilience and accountability, showcasing individuals who had navigated difficult circumstances while remaining committed to their communities. This approach resonated with many, bridging the gap between skepticism and understanding. The more we engaged, the more I recognized the transformative power of dialogue. Each interaction, whether positive or contentious, became a stepping stone toward deeper connections within the community. As the months passed, our efforts began to yield tangible results. Community members initiated projects to address local issues, drawing on the principles we had discussed. Neighborhood cleanups, food drives, and mentorship programs sprang to life, embodying the spirit of connection we had sought to foster. During one such project, a group of volunteers came together to create a community garden. It was a collective effort that brought people from different backgrounds together, united by a common goal. As we planted seeds, laughter filled the air, creating an atmosphere of camaraderie. I stepped back for a moment, observing the scene. Children worked alongside adults, sharing stories and laughter as they dug in the earth. It was a beautiful representation of the interconnectedness we had been advocating. Afterward, we gathered for a brief reflection. A woman who had participated in the garden project shared, "I never thought I'd enjoy this. I came here for the food, but seeing everyone working together has opened my eyes to what we can achieve." Her words echoed a sentiment I had heard before, reinforcing the idea that these experiences were shifting perspectives. People were beginning to recognize the power of connection in action. The community's response continued to inspire us. People reached out with their own stories of connection and growth, sharing how our message had influenced their lives. It was a reminder that even small actions could lead to profound change. In the months that followed, we organized a community celebration, inviting everyone to share their experiences and achievements. The event became a showcase of our collective efforts, highlighting the projects that had emerged from our discussions. As I stood before the crowd, I felt a surge of gratitude. "We've come together in ways I never imagined possible," I said, looking out at the diverse faces gathered before me. "This journey has shown us the power of connection. Each of you has played a vital role in this movement." The applause that followed filled the air, a tangible acknowledgement of our shared accomplishments. It was a moment of recognition, a celebration of the strength that comes from community. In the months that followed, I realized that our journey was far from complete. The challenges we faced were ongoing, and our commitment to fostering understanding and connection remained essential. We began to explore new avenues for engagement, considering how we could reach even broader audiences. I felt a sense of excitement as we brainstormed ideas, eager to continue the work we had started. However, I also understood the importance of patience. Each conversation, each interaction, was a step towards something greater. We were not just addressing immediate challenges, we were nurturing a mindset of empathy and connection that would endure. As I reflected on our progress, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey we had undertaken. It was a path filled with complexities, but it was also rich with opportunity. Together, we were shaping a narrative that embraced the intricacies of our existence. We had embarked on a journey together, and it was far from over. The possibilities stretched before us, and I was eager to see where this path would lead. Together, we would continue to navigate the complexities of connection, fostering understanding in a world that often felt divided. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant energy of our community, I felt a sense of purpose reaffirmed. We were part of a larger story, one that was still being written, and I was ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead.